Hi, welcome to this video. Today I will be demonstrating how to create a transmissive ICC profile. So what do you use transmissive ICC profiles for? For light boxes like this. So normally if you print on any photo paper or whatever media, you will have of course the ambient light reflecting off your print, giving you the impression of the color that you want. With a light box it's different because the color and the consistency of the light box will determine the color that you see when you put your backlit film on top of it. So in order to measure a backlit ICC profile or transmissive ICC profile, you need to have the i1Pro3 Plus. The standard i1Pro3 will not suffice. And there's a couple of reasons for that, but I can demonstrate easily the most obvious one. This one has a much larger aperture, so you can see inside the chrome ring. That's the actual aperture through which it measures. On the non-plus version, that is much smaller. And being much smaller, that means that less light is coming in, and it's hard to measure through a media that will not let much light through. So imagine if you measure a photo paper, you will use the embedded light source, which will reflect off your print media. When you're measuring a backlit media, you won't be using the embedded light, you'll be using the backlight from the light box. So that's why you need the i1Pro3 Plus. Besides that, it's also created, the geometry is slightly different inside the device, so it's better suited for this job. So what we'll do is I'll demonstrate the entire process, but I won't be going through each measurement step because that will just be boring. I will just be going over the interface, how to use it, and what you can expect and how you can apply the profile within the workflow. So let me start by switching on my Mac. And I had that one open. So this is i1Profiler. I've started it with the i1Pro3 Plus connected, and the menu we'll be using today is Transmissive Profiling with i1Pro3 Plus. There's also a i1IO option, so if you have an i1IO table, you could use that. I prefer the standard version because I feel that if you do a scan measurement, so you measure while moving the device over the ruler, you'll be getting more measurements, not just from one spot, but from several spots. So that, I think, by definition, makes it more accurate than when you're doing spot measurement, which is exactly what the i1Pro i1O is doing. i1IO. So let me select the option. And first of all, it will give us pretty clear instructions. I'll try to elaborate on what's not so clear because it's easy to make a mistake. And if you do, you will end up with something that won't work. So it asks you to make a selection of your media, which can be clear, translucent, or textile. So you can also use this for flag kind of material. In this case, I'm using a translucent media, as you can see. So this is the printing side and this is the back side. And if I put it on the table, you can see light is coming through it quite easily. But it does, it is translucent, so it's not completely clear, it's not completely opaque. So what you do is you print these 3 pages, which will be 2 target pages, like this. But to start off, you will have 1 template page. And it won't come out of your printer like this, but it will come out with this, of course, still in there. And you take scissors and you cut them out using the black lines left and right and the dotted line at the top. We use this as a template to place the targets on our light box, because if we don't, we won't be getting a consistent position and we might not be measuring the same light coming from the light box at a particular point. So let me start by skipping the printing part because I already have them. Oh, let me go back 1 second. I forgot one thing. Default, it goes to letter size. I use A4. You can also use A3. I would not recommend using the largest size because the largest size I found to have a slight bug in i1 Profiler. It doesn't line up with the patches. So I choose either A4 or A3. They might fix that in the next update, but in the current version, that's a bug. So we choose translucent i1 Plus A4 paper size, and then we go next because I've already printed them. So if you print these, make sure that you print them without an ICC profile. If you do an ICC profile on top, you will not get something that's correct. So if you have a RIP, switch off your color management. If you're using a printer driver, make sure you're not choosing an ICC profile, but do a print without an ICC profile. Then the next thing we need to do is measure the light box with the light off. But first it wants us to tape the template to the light box. So we'll do that. I got 4 tapes ready. So let me just stick them on here. It doesn't really matter where you do this exactly on your light box, but I would recommend doing it somewhere in the center of your light box because that will be the main focus point when people look at images on your light box. So that's step 1. Then it will ask me to measure the light box with the light off. I had it on purpose because it needs to warm up, and it will still be warm if I turn it off for a few seconds. So I'll now turn it off, and I will put the device, which I calibrated, of course, up front because you always need to do that first. I'll place that in the middle of the template, and I will measure. That takes a measurement of the light box itself. And then it wants the light box on, so switch it back on, and I measure again. So what this basically does, it gives the software information on how much light is coming from the light box. The next thing is a smart trick that X-Rite has added to the software, and that is to measure the light box at each of the spots of each patch of the target. So that means that even if your light box isn't completely consistent, because we measure the light at each particular spot, we know the light source there and we can calculate the right colors. So one thing I did do wrong the first time I used it, I started measuring, as I always do, to the left of the black line that you have on your printed target. You don't want to do that. You want to start within the black line. So within the cutout area that you're working on. And also note that you have to do this left to right. So you can't go left, right, right, left, but you have to go always left, right. So we start by saying continue. And now it wants the 9 particular lines read. So let's start with the first one. Click it, wait a while, slowly move. Don't go too fast here. If you go too fast, it will fail, depending on your light box, but it will probably fail. And go all the way to the right. If you did it correctly, a green light shows up. If you did it incorrectly, a red light blinks and you'll be asked to do the same patch again, same line again. So I move back to the left and move it over to the second line. Again, start at the first position, slowly move to the right. And we repeat that process for each line, and I will probably speed up the video so you don't have to watch this. So that's the last one of them. Now check, before you hit next, check that all the patches look fairly identical. If your first row is darker, then you probably started like I did the first time to the left of the black line, which means you'll first measure through 2 layers, being one of the translucent template and then the actual light box. And you don't want to do that. You just want to measure the patches inside the template. So this looks consistent. And what this does, it compensates for the fact that light boxes have a tendency to not be lighting up the material identical on each spot of the light box. So we'll go to the next step. Then we have to measure the back of the substrate. So don't measure it on the light box, measure it on your table that you got with your device. So let me get this one out of the way. So what we do is we take one of our targets, we reverse it on the measuring table, and we place the device on it and we measure once. And now it's ready to actually start measuring the targets. And the reason we taped this template to the light box is that now we have a fixed position at which we can measure spots of the targets. So we take our first page of our target, which is, let me see, this one. And we place it and we align it so that the dotted lines and black lines line up with the target that is underneath. So this is a way to make sure that the position that we use is going to be identical to the first measurement we did. And I use a tape to keep it in place here. Then we use the ruler again to go to the first line. And in this case, we will measure starting at line 1 to the left of the black bar, the black line on the target. I'm not sure if I mentioned it, but the first one, if you measure the not the target but the template, you always measure left to right, so that you don't go right to left on the second line, always left to right only. Don't ask me why it's different on each other measurement, but that's the way it is. So if you don't do it correctly, you'll get all your measurements mixed up. So measure it on the left to right on the template page and go left to right, right to left on the target pages, as is indicated, as you can see on the screen. So again, I take my device, place it on the ruler, and now place it on the template area in front of the black line. And I first say continue. And it wants me to measure 18 lines, which is correct with 2 pages. And it will start. And again, I will speed this up because this is not so fascinating to watch. So that was the last line of the first target page. So we can now remove target page number 1 and use page 2. And as you can see, that one has 2 patches less than a full page, which means on the screen you also see 2 less colors, 2 colors less. Again, line them up and tape them. Put the ruler back on there. If you don't get this to work, you probably are moving too fast after clicking the button. So what I do is I click the button, wait for a second, and then move. That makes the measurement more accurate. So that is the measurement of target 1 and 2. Now, before you click next, make sure that the patches that you see, so that the colors that you see here line up. If you see a green here instead of a blue, your page setup wasn't correct. So you need to have something that matches at least fairly well the colors that you measured. Of course, it won't be the same because this comes out much lighter than the scent color, but that's normal in a backlight. So make sure that they do line up. And when you're done, you click on next. Now we get to the profile settings page. I won't go into the details of what I do here. I have a tendency to put this at custom and then leave everything at 50%. You can play around with these. This will just matter for the perceptual rendering intent anyway, so it's not that relevant. The tables I do always set to optimize quality because I don't care how big the tables become as long as they are the best. And smoothness I tend to go to advanced and go to 50%. One important setting is ICC profile version. If your software supports it, use ICC version 4. If it doesn't, then you have to use version 2. When you're done with this, you click on next again. The next thing we'll do is we'll generate a patch set for a second set of target pages. Well, let me click that. So what this does is, based on the measurements that we got from the first 2 pages, it will generate a second set of pages that we can also print. It takes a while, so I have to wait until this is finished. But once it is, it would be nice if there was a feedback here that it's actually working, because it doesn't give me feedback. But there it is. Once it is there, you can export these. Well, let me scroll down. You can export these or print these. And I already did that. Just know that you print page 3 and 4, and you follow exactly the same procedure in measuring page 3 and 4. So you print them, go next, measure these, and go next onto the next page after you've measured all of them. So then the next step is the choice of either the same measurement for the light box, because you'll be making the print for this actual light box. If you're making the print for another light box, you can measure the light coming from that particular light box. So you can make one profile and adjust it for whatever light box that you want to print for. And you don't have to do the entire recalibration again and reprofiling. So I'll leave it at the same because I'm really profiling for this light box. And I'll say next. And then it will ask me, like any normal profile, to enter a name for the profile so I can load it into my software. I've done that already, and I can show you the effects of the profile by looking at the profile in print software. So what I've done is in Saturn, which is print software that I wrote, which is available on Gemini.systems. It is a click-based print solution for all major brands, all major printers, because it doesn't use drivers but uses IPP to communicate with the printer. So it can basically drive any printer that is AirPrint compatible, from the very smallest to the very largest ones. So what I've done here, I've loaded it up into my system. I can show you that. In this case, I printed it on the Epson P900. And if I go into its settings, you can see I have a backlit definition. I used photographic semi-gloss as a media selection on my Epson printer because it doesn't know backlit. It doesn't have backlit as an option. And then I printed the targets using that setting. So I have to use that setting again when I do my printing. And the ICC profile is the one I just created in i1Profiler. And as for rendering intent, I've got some interesting results with different printers. So the first one I did on a Canon printer, Canon 4000S, a roll printer, a big one. And the first print that I got using relative colorimetric, which I normally use, turned out to be completely yellow. And I thought, well, something went wrong, but it didn't. As soon as I switched to absolute colorimetric, it looked fine. So you can have a look at the profile if you have the right tools for it to see what the result will likely be. So if I use the software that I use for this is ColorThink Pro, and if I open a profile, and I will just open first the one that I just measured, the Epson 900. If I look at the curves here and look at relative colorimetric, looks perfectly normal. So you see it's not a completely straight line, but it's fine. It's pretty neutral. And you can see the end result, which is this curve, is pretty much linear, but doesn't go black because it's backlit. So you always have light coming through it, and goes up to an L value of 31. So all blacks are elevated compared to a photo print, which is close to 0 black. Now, interestingly enough, if I use if I open up the Canon profile, which I did exactly the same way, but for some reason, when I look at the relative colorimetric, I get a line going from black to yellow-green, which is exactly what my print looked like, because I can just reach out and grab that one. Should have gotten that earlier, but so this is the print I got, which looks horribly green, which is what I get if I use relative colorimetric. So the profile inspector here tells me it won't be neutral. Interestingly enough, if I choose absolute colorimetric, it is neutral. So somehow with this printer, I needed to set the rendering intent to absolute to get right colors. To me, it makes sense because you're measuring the combination of the light, the media, and the ink. And you're not measuring for standard light, and you're not measuring for standard paper because the paper color will be defined by the backlit. So if you run into very yellow print, change your rendering intent to absolute colorimetric. On the Epson, I don't need to do that because I can see that relative is fine and absolute is also fine. They're slightly different, but they're both fine. And then finally on what it does and how it works. So let me go to my Saturn software. So what I did is I printed this file, as you can see. There's this file. You can see it's off, but I also did it on the Epson unprofiled and with a profile used. And you can even see the difference if I just show them without giving you a photo on your screen. So if you look at this one is much brighter, and especially the strawberries look a lot more natural than they do on this one. This one is too dark in its colors, too unsaturated in its colors. And if I look at these kits here, there are 3 kits. They look very pale when I put them on the light box. And if I put this one on the light box, they look absolutely natural. And of course, you should look at it when you put it on the light box. So what I'll do is I'll superimpose over the video the effect of the unprofiled print I did on the Epson together with the profiled one so you can see the advantage. But basically what happens is you get back your saturation, colors look natural, and the color balance is pretty perfect. So even if your printer is not in perfect balance, or if your cyan print head is giving you slightly less or more ink than the other heads, it will be compensated by the ICC profile you generate. So it's a really nice solution to create high quality display prints, lightbox prints, I should say. One trick I did like in Saturn that I could use for this particular application. For the Canon one, even though I have to select absolute colorimetric, because I have a built-in black point compensation for images, I can combine that with the absolute rendering intent, which is something you normally cannot do. Normally, absolute rendering intent is absolute. You cannot do black point compensation. So it will try to render all colors exactly as they should be. If you want to increase more detail in your dark areas, then you can use the black point compensation here. So I can show you, this is what I would get without black point compensation, and I can use a slider, and you can see I get more details when I go more to the right in my shadow area. So I don't like the 100 because that makes it a little bit too light, but I'm fine with using a value of 50 or 25 to get just a little bit more detail in my black areas. And that's something you can only do with Saturn, because all other printing solution, you'd have to change your image, or you'd have to use perceptual rendering intent, which you never want to do anyway. If you have black point compensation in your print software, you can of course use that, but then if you get into this problem, it won't help you. So if you have to use absolute, then Saturn can help you get the right prints out on your display films. So the verdict, how well this works. It works wonderful once you get it working. It's easy to make a mistake. The targets are large because the patches that you measure are large. These are a lot bigger than the patches you have for the i1Pro without the plus. They are like 8 times bigger, so you use 8 times more media than you will on the i1Pro3. But for backlit media, which is expensive, it doesn't really matter because it's just 2 A4 pages or 4 A4 pages in total that you have to print before you can get your colors right. And I think 4 pages A4, that's a no-brainer. And it's the only way to get your colors really accurate on backlit film. I've not seen any other solution that does a good job. Would I get the same device for really small printers? For normal profiling? Probably not because of the patch size. The patch size is large, so if I want to make a profile with, say, 1400 patches, I'd be looking at a stack of target prints, and I don't like that. So for normal prints, I'm fine using the i1Pro3 without the plus. And even though it will be slightly less accurate, I'm still choosing that one. The other application that the i1Pro3 Plus is targeted at is measuring media that are not flat. So if you have a canvas which can have a rough structure, the measurements with the i1Pro3 without the plus can be inaccurate because you're measuring at a very small point, and if you're measuring on a surface that goes up and down, you might get wrong measurements. The advantage of the i1Pro3 Plus is that you have a larger aperture and you can get rid of a lot of the problems from the surface irregulations. On top of that, this also has a polarization filter, which you can use, and that corrects the reflection of light on those hills. So if you have a reflection of your light, you might get a light spot, extra light into the device because it just reflects off your light source towards the sensor. So that's a way to compensate for that. I might make a video dedicated to that to see how much of a difference it makes compared to an i1 Pro without the plus, but that's not a subject of this video. So if you have any questions on how to do this or how you can make use of profiles like this, feel free to contact me. And for now, I'd like to thank you for watching. Bye-bye.